Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Crazy Money. This is Paul Ollinger, your host. I am grateful to you for sharing part of your day with me on this journey to do money better. This week's guest has a message for you. Your stuff isn't making you happy. Less is more, and downsizing doesn't have to suck. That's actually 3 messages, but they're all related. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Graham Hill, who is the founder of LifeEdited. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him. He also has 2 TED Talks that have been viewed over 7 million times. 7 million. I'm going to tell you more about him after I set a little context for our discussion about the way we live as Americans, about the way we live in our homes as Americans. Maybe Canadians too. I don't know. I don't have data for them, but I do have data for Americans. Consider this about big houses, folks, about individual sprawl. The average house, the average new house today, according to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in 2015, the average new house today is 1,000 square feet larger than it was in 1973. Okay? Listen to this. In 1973, the average new house was 1,660 square feet, and it was there to provide housing for 3.01 persons. I don't know what 0.01 of a person is, but let's roll with it for now. That meant that each person, on average, there was 551 square feet per person in the new house in 1973. In 2015, the average new house is 2,687 square feet, and it provides shelter for 2.54 persons. That's 1,057 square feet per person. It's a 60% in overall square footage and almost a doubling of square footage per people living in those homes. What's happened in that time? Have people gotten larger? Well, yes, they have, but that's a whole other story. We're building way bigger houses with way more stuff in it than we ever have in the past. Consider this. Bathrooms. In 1978, 74% of homes of new housing had 2 bathrooms or fewer. In 2015, 86% of houses have 2.5 bathrooms or more. So we have sprawled, ladies and gentlemen. We have collectively decided, the marketplace has decided that we want a lot more space. When you have a bigger house, what does it mean? It means you consume more heating and air conditioning. It means you have more toilets that consume more water. Maybe you don't go to the bathroom any more than you did in 1973. Well, I was 4 in 1973. I went to the bathroom a lot back then. But when your toilets are running, you're using more water, okay? So what else do? You buy more furniture. You buy more art. You buy more things to put on the floor, rugs or carpets or whatever. So we're just consuming tons more stuff, and our houses are getting bigger. And look, I get it. Like when I was a kid, I think there's 2 big things. I'm speaking as a guy, by the way. 2 big things to demonstrate your status in the world. The first thing you got to get is a cool car, right? So when you finally start making a little bit of money, you get out of school, you start making some money. What do you do? If you don't live in New York or where you don't need a car, you buy a cool car, and that tells people, oh, look, he's got a car. He's making decent money. He's got a cool car. And then what do? You're a little bit older. You're ready to settle down. You buy a big ass house. That should be the name of this week's episode, Americans in Our Big Ass Houses. And it's understandable. It is, quote unquote, the American dream. And our laws and our tax benefits are written such that it favors and encourages Americans to buy as big a house as they possibly can. This doesn't necessarily make us any happier. It just means we have more stuff to deal with on a daily basis. So let's get back to Graham Hill. Graham is a successful entrepreneur. He founded or co-founded, ran, and then sold both SiteWorks and TreeHugger.com, which he sold to Discovery Communications. By the way, Graham should not be confused with the legendary Formula One driver, the latter Graham Hill having been dead for over 40 years. So this is not the dead Graham Hill who raced cars. This is Graham Hill, who has also co-founded LifeEdited. What does LifeEdited mean? It means to edit yourself, your positions, and your wants down considerably to achieve many benefits, including less chaos in your brain, more time for productive and happy living, and reducing your footprint on the planet. All those carpets, all that heat, all that stuff affects the planet. Now listen, while some of these topics have been politicized. This is not a political conversation. This conversation is about how we as individuals, as consumers, can create the right kind of living space for ourselves and for our family that really optimizes our happiness. This isn't about trying to prove how austere we can live. It's basically trying to say, how much do we need, making conscious choices about consuming the things that are really going to lead to our happiness. And by the way, when you look at some of the links to the apartments that Graham and his team at LifeEdited have designed, including his 350 square foot apartment in New York City, links to which are in the show notes, and his 1,000 square foot house in Maui, these things are beautiful. They are gorgeously designed and proof that less can actually be more, that there is actually significant benefit to downsizing our lives. And kind of like how Tesla came to the market with a more environmentally friendly product that was all about performance and awesomeness, Graham's small footprint architecture demonstrates that you can live quite well in a beautifully designed environment while reducing your impact on the planet and the chaos in your brain that's caused when you have too much stuff in your life. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is Graham Hill of LifeEdited.
So it wasn't like a huge eureka, it just sort of happened over time. When you design something thoughtfully based around your needs and it's high quality and it's terrific. Like, I love that place. And, I don't know, maybe I'm weird in that I somehow feel like I've largely avoided the status sort of affliction. Like I've made money. I've sold a couple companies, but I don't feel like I need to have some ginormous mansion to show people that I have money, and I'm very happy there.
My name is Paul Ollinger. I'm a stand-up comedian with a background in the corporate world. I hit the lottery when I worked at a small company called Facebook. I'm fascinated with money, why we're so obsessed with it, and how it makes us happy or not. Welcome to Crazy Money. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Crazy Money Podcast. I am Paul Ollinger. Joining me today is Graham Hill, founder of LifeEdited and treehugger.com. Graham, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So treehugger.com, does this make you some kind of crazy hippie guy?
No, it's the name's actually tongue-in-cheek. So it is actually modern, and the whole idea of it was really that most media, I started in 2004, most media at that time, environmental media, was either very small labors of love or nonprofit, and quite boring and really primarily focused on the hippies. And I love the hippies. They're really important, and they're the backbone of all of this. But I wanted to create a new form of environmental media that would appeal to people that lived in cities and people that wore collared shirts. Hippies are a tiny, tiny portion of our society, and I wanted to help sort of mainstream green.
I love it. So LifeEdited and Treehugger have some things in common. Tell me about what you do, what your mission is, and why you started both these entities.
So Treehugger, I began to give you the reasons there, but it was mostly that I just found that environmental media was all about inspiring by fear, and it was all about stopping things, and it was very focused, as I said, on the hippies and not designed forward. And so I wanted something that, in my mind and from my research, I could see there's this incredible green world out there that was actually really tech forward, pro-business, and aspirational and cool and fun and exciting and about yes. And so I wanted to do something that was about inspiring by hope, that was really designed forward and that would appeal to someone who lived in the city and that sort of stuff. And so that's really where Treehugger came from. And it was one of the very early blogs. My friend Nick Denton of Gawker Media had a couple going at that point, and he really pushed me to do it. I had had the idea years before in like 2000, but the blog technology is really what enabled it to happen. And I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time, and all the blogs were very incestuous and cross-linking, and so very quickly we were the biggest green site on the web, and had that maintained that for a couple of years at least until the big guys got into the game. You eventually sold that company, correct? Yeah, I sold it amazingly in 2007 to Discovery, and it's still going strong. Yeah, I guess I sold it 12 years ago.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what LifeEdited is, why you started it, and what your mission is?
Sure. I mean, my basic focus for the last decade, roughly, has been around small living. And so LifeEdited was the venue for that. So we're, small living evangelists in general and shared a lot via lifeedited.com and our various social media channels and my speaking. And then we did a bunch of architecture, like design for a bunch of personal projects, 3 of them, and then a bunch of stuff for clients. And the basic premise of LifeEdited is an environmental one and a financial one and a happiness one. What we believe is that Americans in particular, and much of the world, but Americans in particular, North Americans, have supersized themselves over the last half century or so. So we've gone from 1,000 square foot average homes to 2,700, and we have smaller families. So it's about 3 times the amount of space per person that we used to have. But that has not helped our finances. We actually have a lot more debt than ever. It certainly hasn't helped our environmental footprints. We use about 4 times the energy we used to. And so our footprints have ballooned. And all this would make some sense if we were happier, but we're not. Happiness levels have flatlined. And so that didn't make sense to me. And when I looked around the world, you can see Europe, for example, has their average housing size is 1,000 square feet. And I don't hear a lot of people going, oh, those poor Europeans and their terrible lifestyles. So the basic premise is that if you apply smart design, technology, and perhaps a little bit of behavior change, that you can live a smaller, smarter life that's going to reduce your environmental footprint by a great deal, will save you some money, and that a smaller life is an easier one to manage and ultimately a happier one. And so that's the basic premise of LifeEdited.
What drove that expansion of space over the past 50 years?
I think I don't think we feel bad about ourselves. I think that we've been around for a long time, and I think for the longest time, probably until maybe the middle of last century, more was always better. Mm-hmm. We just didn't have much stuff, but at a certain point, more isn't better, and I think we sort of reached that point. And so it's hard. It's counterintuitive, but there's something that just makes sense about having the right amount of stuff. So I don't know, if you just think about like the average, our houses will have like a living room and a media room. That's like a very small detail, but if you think about it, it just doesn't make any sense. You don't need those 2 rooms. You don't need multiple living rooms, and all these things cost you money, and in a way separated ourselves as well. Like I do think there's fundamentally we are interdependent and social beings, and we need some privacy and some time alone, but for the most part we like to be around people. In a way, if you look at the housing and what we were striving for, and still exists to a great extent. So the suburban lifestyle is you're spending a bunch of time driving, from your work alone in your car, and then you come into perhaps a gated community, and then you come into your, garage, and then you come into your house, and your house is so big that your whole family is spread out. And then even if you are in the same room, you're separated via technology because everyone's on their phones or their iPads or their laptop. And so it's all very alienating.
Right.
And separating us, and I think we actually do want to be together. And so the part of the happiness factor is, there's something like you want to be with your family, you want to be with your friends, you want to be in the same space, and we're unfortunately attracted to this. I think we're somewhat scared of intimacy, perhaps. So we're attracted to sort of more space, and it's a complicated thing. I think there's also status as a big part of things,
Sure.
By having a big house, you show people that you're rich, and that somehow makes you feel better, although ultimately it probably doesn't. And, it's a complicated thing, but I think people that live small, that have lived big, are often very happy that way. That's certainly my experience.
The points you're making are very interesting. And one of the reasons I started this podcast and started writing about the topic of what happens when you make money and buy stuff is because I went through I went through this cycle. I'm still in the cycle myself. And I mean, when I grew up, I was one of 6 kids living in a house with 8 people and 3 toilets. And I always wanted privacy and I always wanted my own toilet. And when I made some money, I was like, oh, wow, I get to buy a really big house. And I bought a giant house. And now I'm in a house with 4 people and 8 toilets. And one of them is always running. My water bills are crazy. We got more space than we need. And I really didn't know what I was biting off till I owned a big house. And now I'm like, oh, wow. Well, I don't want to just move to move. But if the house was made of Play-Doh, I'd give half of it back to you, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you're a great example. I think there are a ton of examples, and I did it myself for sure.
So is everybody who lives in a 5,000 square foot house a bad person, or are there things that we can do to address the problem without picking up and moving?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally people can probably live smaller, and as a result, they're going to be happier, save some money, lower their footprints. I think that's clear. And so, but it's like different strokes for different folks, and different people have different ways of living and things that are important to them. And if I'm like a sculptor or something, yeah, I might need a really big studio. I have welding and all sorts of equipment, or if I have a huge family, or I don't know. But so yeah, of course you're not a bad person, and part of this is just us sort of realizing, we're fumbling along and sort of cluing into what really matters to us, and so I wouldn't say anyone with a large house is a bad person, but they might consider downsizing in the next opportunity.
Sure.
Certainly, and I think like my sort of uncle is this guy Mo Joyal. Said years ago, and I don't think I listened to him, but he was a successful entrepreneur and ended up having places in San Francisco and Toronto and Maui, and he said lease life. He said that's sort of what he came to, and I think it's really true. Like there's a real tendency for us to want to own stuff, but you buy a lot of stress and remote management and money, and I think there's something to be said for just keeping it easy on yourself. And I mean, personally, right now, I built this amazing off-grid place that I'm talking to you from in Maui, but I still have my 350 square foot apartment in New York. And let me tell you, having a landlord is a nice thing.
You don't have to deal with the problems when the toilet's leaking.
So I don't know. I'm a big advocate. It's not for everyone, but I think as my sort of proposal is that overall, not everyone, but a lot of us, we could do a lot better by living smaller.
Can you share a little bit more of your story, your background, and how you came to this realization? Because you didn't come out of the gate as a minimalist, right?
No, not really. Not really. I mean, I moved from Vancouver. I fell in love with the internet while I was at Emily Carr Product Design School in Vancouver, and moved down to Seattle, bunked in with my cousin Tish Hill, and we set about starting an internet company to build websites. This was 95, like really, really, really early. People were confusing their email addresses with their website addresses, kind of thing. Uh-huh. And we did some good work, landed a Microsoft job, did some good work, and sort of went from there to millions of dollars of business from Microsoft, grew it to 60 people over 3 years and sold it. And so I was 28 and had a bunch of money. And, society, as you saw, really pushes you towards spending. What you should have is a big house and a fast car and all sorts of country club membership and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's sort of what it pushes you towards. And so I did that and had a 3,500 foot home and a nice car and et cetera, et cetera. And then I just ended up, I'd always loved New York, and I had a breakup, and I don't know, I just ended up moving to New York. And I started to do the same thing again. I had a big 1,800 square foot loft that I rented, and I ended up having a bunch of roommates. And then I fell in love with a Spanish woman named Olga Sesplugas and lived in New York for a bit. And then she went back to Barcelona, and I followed her and moved in with her there to her small place. And it was in the spare bedroom, small, that I started Tree Hugger. And then I got her involved because she was clearly a good person to work with, and we realized that we didn't have to be there. Like, we set Tree Hugger up as a virtual company. We realized that we could easily travel, and so we took off. And we lived in Buenos Aires, in Bangkok, in India. We were in Toronto. We traveled to Morocco. We were in New York. We were like all over the map. And we just had 2 bags. Like, we didn't even have to check. And we had amazing experiences, saved a lot of money, got a lot of work done, and just clued in that we were very happy with very little stuff. And so when we moved back to New York, instead of getting a big place, we moved into a 350 square foot place on Kenmare and Center in Soho in Manhattan. And it was great. I got terrific memories of that tiny little place. And so it just sort of, that was really sort of where it came from. And so it wasn't like a huge eureka. It just sort of happened over time. And then I just realized that I was not very happy that way. And so the various small apartments, I did a 420 square foot one and a 350, which I still own in Manhattan, which is for sale, by the way, are great. Like, when you design something thoughtfully based around your needs and it's high quality and it's terrific. Like, I love that place. And, I don't know, maybe I'm weird in that I somehow I feel like I've largely avoided the status sort of affliction. Like, I've made money. I sold a couple companies, ended up selling Tree Hugger later on, but I don't feel like I need to have some ginormous mansion to show people that I have money, and I'm very happy there. So I've loved it. And to be honest, I built this place, which is 1,000 square feet, 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, partly to show you can do it for families. And the place works amazingly, but it's also much more of a monster because it's bigger. It's also in a tropical environment, etc. But there's something incredible about a small, beautiful apartment and editing your stuff down so you know where everything is. It's really easy to clean. It's really easy to organize. Just everything works. And I love it.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of the place on LifeEdited.com. That's LifeEdited, EDITED.com. For our listeners who want to go check it out, the place in New York and the place in Maui are both incredible. It's one thing to live that lifestyle. It's another thing to create a business around it. What do you guys do at LifeEdited? Are you an architecture firm? Are you consultants? What do you do?
Yeah, effectively. I mean, I'm taking a little break now because I'm not sure that real estate development is for me. And although I studied architecture, I've never wanted to build an architecture firm just because I think it's a really hard way to go. And my hat's off to people that do it.
It worked for Mike Brady.
There you go. So I'm not sure. What's next? That's what we did do. We did basically mostly architecture. We did a little raising money and doing some buying and selling, some renovating, some real estate, and evangelizing kind of thing. But I don't know. I'm sort of reevaluating, trying to think about what I want to do next. Probably something in the environmental space, but I'm not sure I have the stomach for it. I think I'm very much a perfectionist, and so product design is great because the pain of I'm sort of an artist. Like I really get into something and I want it right, and I can really it's stressful, it's painful, but at least with a product, when you nail it, then you can replicate it hopefully a lot of times, and it really sort of pays off. Architecture is just, unless it's prefab, which we were very interested in, it's often sort of one-off, and they're just too many decisions and too much to go wrong. And I don't know, it's just, my hat's off to people that can do it, but it's hard for me. This house almost killed me.
How did it almost kill you?
It just was such a challenge to put together, to figure out the design. It's on a sloping site. It's
right.
The weather. There's some fantastic people in Hawaii. There are also some less than fantastic people with terrible work ethic and terrible communication skills. And so it's a real, as an sort of largely East Coaster, 20 years in New York, it's like it was really challenging to get this project to happen.
Do you think, I mean, you're talking about the pain of building something that's really transformational and very different from the way things are done right now. Is there a more practical way for everybody to live smaller than to just pack it all up, throw everything in the dumpster, or recycle everything rather, and move into a 350 square foot apartment? I mean, like, is a less radical approach, could that have a broader, more effective impact if we all just went, if everybody just reduced by 20% instead of trying to reduce
absolutely, absolutely. And I try to be clear about that. I'm not, it's like wherever you are. If you're living to 5,000, okay, well, maybe you can do 3,500. Like,
right.
I'm not saying everyone. And LifeEdited isn't about micro units. Micro units are a solution, and they work very well for certain people, and not well for others. If you're a family, you're obviously not living in 350 square feet.
I couldn't sell that to my wife. I mean, she's pretty cool and pretty flexible.
I think you certainly, regardless of the size of your space, stuff is part of it, and I think that most people can do some editing down of their possessions that will make their lives have lower impact and save them some money, and certainly make them a lot easier to manage. And so I think sort of going through your clothing, your kitchenware, your sports equipment, your tools, all that sort of stuff, I think is a great thing to do. And I think if you are moving, consider a smaller place. And like Resource Furniture, we work with for years, do amazing transforming furniture. And the room that I'm sitting in right now is maybe 10 by 8 or something. Like, it's a pretty small room, but it's got a nice window seat. And then I'm sitting at a table, which is on the back of one of these Resource Furniture Murphy beds. And so, like, 5 minutes before the interview, I strap my duvet on, close the bed, and put my laptop out on this table. And now I've got a great little office. And so this is a bedroom, but also a perfect little office studio kind of thing. And so I think editing your stuff down and taking advantage of transforming furniture is great. Another example would be here. We have a covered lanai, so that doesn't count as part of 1,000 square feet. But we have these also from Resource Furniture, they're sort of like these long, almost like twin beds, and you can move them around. They have these movable backrests, and then 2 transforming coffee tables, and these are just, I don't know, maybe 4 feet long or something. And you grab a little lever, and then they can go from like 6 inches high to 30 inches high, something like that. And then you can also extend them. They're just hidden inside. You just sort of pull on one end, and there's some little leaves that sort of automatically come out. And so I take those 2 rearranged couches a little bit, and I can have a sit-down dinner for 20 people.
Yeah, the pictures on the website are pretty insane. The transformational power of some of that furniture is something I've never seen before. And you can host 10 for dinner in your 350 square foot apartment in Manhattan. That's radical.
Yeah, exactly. So here it's obviously a bigger scale, but we have this wonderful living room with the coffee tables, and then we have a ginormous dining room table that seats 18 or 20. And then, or sometimes we have it as a pull-down screen and a projector, and so we have like this great 100-inch screen, like, for movies at night, and that's all happening in the one space. And so I think editing your stuff down and taking advantage of transformational furniture can work in sort of any space, and certainly helps if you downsize some.
So going back to sort of your awakening, or your do you have a word or a way you refer to the inflection point in your life where you became?
I mean, I don't
liver?
A specific moment. It just sort of happened. But yeah, that's the eureka aha moment, I guess.
So you wrote an op-ed in the New York Times that sort of discussed the ennui of wealth and the pain of possessions and things. And you took some shit for it. I mean, people kind of said, well, who are you, some wealthy guy, to tell me how to live without money? Did that seem fair to you, that just because you had made some money, you didn't have the right to opine on sort of our social malaise?
Yeah. Well, listen, it's the internet. Everyone's a complainer. So that to start with. But no, I didn't feel like it was very fair. I mean, there are a lot of things I could be doing with my life. And
like making more money.
like making more money. Exactly. And that's the sad part of human behavior seems to be anyone who tries to do something good, just people like to jump all over them. But my response to that would be like, hey, I'm sorry. It's certainly better to be able to choose to downsize than to have to downsize. And I very much respect that. And I'm very conscious also of the incredible fortune that the leg up that I had to allow me to get to where I am. Now, I've made some smart moves. I've certainly worked my ass off, and I've been a good guy. And so I have a part in my success. But I also grew up in a middle-class family, and I was able to borrow $6,000 from my dad at 25 years old to sort of help get this company started. And I had opportunities that a lot of people don't. So I do recognize that. But the people that say sort of rich guy, you can't say anything, well, I'm sorry. I actually have seen, I've had no money also. Like, I've been a poor student. I've actually... for the people that don't have money, I've seen both. So I do have a more of a perspective than others. And listen, the fact that I'm even thinking about this instead of just doing models and bottles and just trying to make more money doing whatever the hell with no intention of trying to make the world a better place. I don't know. I think you can give me a little credit. I really have lived this also. I've lived in these small spaces for a long time.
You're not just doing it to become a lifestyle blogger?
No. So I don't know, whatever. People like to complain, so they can complain.
Models and bottles, that I think I need to start another podcast with that title right there. So I can hit both ends of the spectrum. Talking about, oh, by the way, do you still have that audible.com audio player that you had when you were in Seattle?
I think I maybe recycled that at some point. But yeah,
what was the hardest thing for you to give up when it came time to reduce all the clutter and the space in your life?
I mean, I think generally the hard things to give up are sentimental ones are probably very tough. And just the ones where you're like, oh, I might need that. I think those are hard. My recommendation for people is to sort of, if you're going through stuff, you have like 3 boxes or 3 piles. One's yes, I'm going to keep it for sure. One's no, I'm going to sell it, give it, recycle it, throw it out. And then the maybe box, just put stuff in there and then write the date on it and then check back in 3 months or 6 months. And if you can't remember what's in the box, that'll help you put it in the no pile. And, if you can, but you haven't used it in that 3 or 6 months, then, that might help you put it in the no pile. But that would be my general approach. But I suffer from the same. It's hard. Editing's hard. It's hard to let stuff go. It's hard to go, okay, I only want to have 6 shirts and I have 9 shirts and I feel like I like them all. Yeah, it's tough.
My mother-in-law keeps trying to give us her mother's china and silverware. Can you call her for me? Tell her that we don't have space in our giant house for her china.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely hear stories about people who literally lost everything in like a fire and
right.
How it's like hard and then very, very liberating. And I could certainly see that. Certainly, like physical or digital. If I think about my bloody iPhoto library and how disorganized it is, in a way, it would be terribly sad and also really liberating if that just vanished.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, when you got rid of all your analog stuff, did you digitize all your old photos, or what did you do with that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. There were tons of like scan my photos, I think is one. Shoebox is another. You can send negatives, slides, pictures, whatever, VHS tapes. You just send it in and they can digitize all of it. And that allows you to be a digital pack rat instead of a physical pack rat.
Right. What I did find interesting when you're talking about how in the last 50 years we've started to take up 3 or 4 times the amount of space per person. I do think in some ways we don't value some of the trappings of conspicuous consumption that previous generations did, like the china and the silver. And, like when we got married, it wasn't, I don't even think my wife wanted 15 settings of silver and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, even without that stuff, we're finding ways to fill up our houses, you know?
Well, I mean, what's really changed, and then part of the reason for this excess is that there are a lot of factors that, like, so Madison Avenue got very good, very, very good at selling us an idea of us needing X, Y, and Z product. Like they really learned how to do it. And then we, through globalization, cheap labor offshore, robots, techniques, production techniques, volume, big box, etc. We figured out a way to make stuff a lot cheaper.
Efficient shipping.
And then we figure out, like, with big box stores and retail and online retail, and we figure out how to sell stuff to you and make it very, very convenient to get stuff to you, and FedEx and UPS, etc. So we've become very good at enticing you to buy things and to get them to you.
Along those lines, do you find it hard to find builders or contractors that want to build the kind of places that you want to build? Because it seems to me like if I wanted to live in a certain part of town, I can't find a house that's smaller than 2,500 square feet. Like, builders only want to build, they want to maximize square footage on a lot because that's how they get paid.
You're absolutely right. That's a really tough one, because it's the logical financial thing to do. Unfortunately, in today's society, is if you have a lot, you've built to the maximum square footage.
And then you buy a bunch of stuff because you got the square footage. You got to put furniture in it, and art and artifacts and TVs and everything in every room.
Yeah, get knickknacks for.
What is your outlook? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Are you sort of guardedly neutral in what will be done? Clearly, there's a lot that could be done. How do you feel about the environmental and materialist future of the United States?
I don't know, Paul. I don't know. It'd be very easy to get quite dark about it. Like, most 99 point whatever of all species have gone extinct, and we are very smart and we are very stupid. So I don't know. Can we find some approach, new technology, or have the political will and economic will to start really drawing down the carbon so that this doesn't go really sideways? Yeah, maybe. But I don't know. It's easy to think about. It could easy to think that there are very rough times ahead. I like to be optimistic, and it's just a really hard problem because it's the tragedy of the commons. It's the
right.
Doesn't really, what I do, does it really matter that much? That's a tough one to deal with.
It is.
Well, I just was going to say, the U.S. has put more carbon into the air than most, I believe. I think maybe any. But we took advantage of that, and we built this incredible economy and this lifestyle, et cetera. And so, it's in a way understandable for when we're trying to say, well, come on, India or other countries that are sort of coming up, that to lower their footprints, them to be like, F you guys.
Right.
In the last 150 years, raped and pillaged, and now you're just going to turn around and tell us that we have to. So it's a very complicated thing between countries and then with people. So it's tricky, but let's be optimistic. There are a lot of people working really hard on this problem, and a lot can change. And you can see, strangely, like China, because it can be more sort of dictatorial about things, like they may make some real progress because they're having real issues with air quality, etc. So, a few countries really leading the way, and then get some good leadership in our own government on that front, and maybe we'll be in good form.
Well, you do read more about minimalism, and I don't mean the tiny houses programming, but you read a lot about minimalism. You read about the FIRE movement. Do you think those are trends or just things that journalists are writing about because they seem to be click-worthy?
I think that, and this is quite positive, I think that luckily our society is intuitively understands that we've supersized ourselves and is looking for a smaller, simpler life. Why do I think that? Just anecdotally from talking to people, but also, just looking at my TED Talk on my first apartment. It's like 5 million views. And the op-ed in the Times was like the most read thing on the New York Times, entire New York Times site for over a week. And so, this isn't that sexy. So the fact that there's that much interest suggests to me that our society is interested. And just like having been part of, interviewed for that minimalism documentary on Netflix, the number of people that have seen that I just know that so many of my friends and people have seen that there's clearly a very large intuitive interest in living small.
Yeah, that's where I first became aware of you. And then the more I dug into you, I was like, oh, this is cool stuff. I mean, you're doing, when I think of minimalism, I don't think of design. I think of living a pretty bare, austere life. But, you're saying, hey, you can have everything you want. Not every single person on the planet can, but I mean, you can live a small life without depriving yourself of the things you've come to expect, of nice design, of a home theater, of a comfortable bed, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Can you recommend any other great books on design or small living, in addition to The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleansing? Have you heard about this one?
I just know the name, but I haven't read it. I think the Marie Kondo stuff is very popular, and people really like that. I mean, the nice thing about this is that it's mostly nicely integrated into the more general design sites and media in general. So I'm blanking this morning for what a good suggestion on that would be.
Graham, the theory when you downsized was that you were overwhelmed by stuff and space, and so you wanted to reduce your living footprint, live smaller. Are you happier? Do you know that? And in what ways are you happier?
Yeah, certainly. Like, I think probably the easiest thing to understand for most people might be just thinking about spending some time in a nice hotel. There's a thing, everything's sort of nice and it's not too big, and you have all you've edited your favorite stuff to bring with you, basically. And it's just going to be a very calm, there's a certain calmness to it, which I think is really, really lovely. And there's something right about it. It's not, not too big, not too small. And so, I absolutely, I mean, I'm still minutia to deal with, and a fair amount of it. It's just
So you've reduced your space by what percent, and how much have you improved your happiness by, percentage-wise? I need metrics, man. I need numbers.
Metrics. I have no idea. But it's the way that I want to live, period. In a way, I've also realized that the amount of stress that it brings, because the amount of things that I have to worry about, because it's bigger, because it's got landscape, because it's a small piece of land with an Airstream on it, and I'd probably be pretty much as happy.
Right. What is the appropriate number of toilets per person in a house?
So I think part of that question is how the bathrooms are formatted. I think a great thing to do is to actually separate out the components. So if you have a little toilet room, and then you have a sink maybe in the hallway or something, and then you have a shower or bath kind of room, I think then you reduce the traffic. Right. Then if someone's using the toilet, someone can still use the shower.
Like when my sister was curling her hair for most of the 1980s, and I was jumping up and down outside waiting to use the toilet.
So I think that's sort of what you want to think about. I guess 2.5 bath in this place for a 4-bedroom kind of thing, and that certainly works great.
Is there a designer or a movement, a way of living that's inspired you the most in the living spaces that you've created?
I mean, inspiring people for me, Buckminster Fuller, certainly. He would be sort of one of the biggest. I think the stuff that he has to say is amazing. I think on more philosophy level, I think the Stuart Brand says some terrific things. My friend Saul Griffith, it's always been very inspiring to me. My friend Yves Bahar does some really cool design work. I mean, the great thing about media these days is there's so much of it, and you come in contact with so many different things, and that it can sort of come really from anywhere.
So now that you've gotten rid of all the exogenous terrors in your life, material goods, you're just left to face reality with no other distraction. Is that intimidating?
Yeah, that's right. And I would advocate strongly for a meditation practice. It's a great way to just sort of get used to just sitting in what is. And I think that's a very powerful thing, not having to change anything, but just accepting sort of what is. I do think that this also brings up an important topic that we haven't talked about, and that's your digital life. That is more and more of an important topic these days. And I think all these approaches can really be applied to your digital life. The amount of space, the amount of stuff, we also can be incredibly overwhelmed with our digital lives. And so, the amount of friends that you have on these various networks, the amount of time you spend on them, whether you let notifications rule your life or you really shut them down partially or entirely. What I would like, and I haven't found where to do it yet, and it would be a hard thing to make happen, but I'd love to have half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the afternoon, half an hour in the day kind of thing, and the rest of the time not really bothered. And this whole instant expectation for instant response to things, and the whole thing is ridiculous. We built these crazy distraction machines that just rule our lives. That more and more dinners, I'm just blown away, or just time with friends, just blown away with how much distraction there is with these phones. I think it's not good for us. I think if you really tune into how you feel, generally, if you spend time on social media, it's not necessarily a positive thing. And it certainly is a time sink that takes you away from like more critical thought and spending time reading books and watching documentaries and like just more in-depth focused things versus these little tiny bits of information that it's the whole thing's a nightmare.
Now seems like a pretty good time for me to plug my Instagram account, which is Paul or Ollinger. Please go there and I think you're right. But you say you would like to find a half an hour in the morning and half an hour in the evening. Why haven't you? I mean, you're a pretty purposeful guy. I mean, you've started a bunch of companies, one of which is you're walking the walk with the way you live. What's prohibiting you from reducing your screen time?
Somewhat the dopamine hits that I get from it, and partially the technology. I mean, what I was referring to was I was hoping there would be like a setting, so I could just set it. Okay, this is it.
Oh, right, yeah.
I could go into airplane mode for those periods, and I certainly should. I think it would make my life generally better. I mean, I'm not too bad compared to most, I would say,
right.
But And let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like I am giving an interview on that will be part of a podcast that will be listened to on a phone kind of thing. Like there's some great stuff about it, and you could be following really interesting things and learning and there's amazing. I think laughter is a very important part of life, and there's some of the funniest things on the internet, and so there's definitely some great parts of social media, but I think in the same way we've supersized ourselves, and we could pull that back a lot, and I think that would be good for us.
Yeah, cool. Well, I agree with you on the meditation, even though I've been meditating for over a year and I'm still an asshole, but I'm not as much of one as I used to be. It's definitely been a big contributor to some improvements in my life. So I agree with you on that. Well, man, hey, Graham, I really appreciate you taking time to talk to us today. Where can people find out more about LifeEdited?
LifeEdited.com is a full site with a ton of information. That's a great place to look. If you're looking for me to speak, I'm represented by APB. I mean, we have all the Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. So if you just do a search for LifeEdited, you'll track that down.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, the videos and pictures of both his apartment in Manhattan and his home in Maui are super cool, thought-provoking, and interesting from a architecture porn perspective. So it's worth checking out. Anything else, Graham, that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, environmental plug. Very unfortunately, a lot of our society thinks if you recycle, that's sort of what it means to be green, but it's actually, unfortunately, a very small component. And so I would really encourage people to consider, if they have a car, moving to an electric car. Basically, in all states, you have an option to buy green power. If you can't get it through your local utility, you can buy RECs, which are renewable energy credits, which effectively do the same thing, effectively get you green power. And those are some more powerful things that you can do. Also, weekday vegetarianism or full vegetarianism is an awesome thing to do for your health and for the planet. So those are a few things that are actually powerful and can really reduce your footprint.
So you can live in a big house and still have a better impact by not eating meat and buying renewable energy credits and reducing what you use, not just recycling what you use.
That's right.
Well, I hope it's a great day in Hawaii. We appreciate you joining us and look forward to more great things from you in the future. Thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot. It was very fun talking to you.
There you have it, Graham Hill. Thank you so much, Graham, for your time. Keep doing your great work. By the way, I want to be honest about my toilets per person ratio. I grew up in a house with 3 toilets and 8 people. That ratio is 0.375. And I now own a house with 4 people and 8 toilets, which is 2.0 toilets per person. And so let's see, what is that? Want to do the math real quick. 2 divided by 0.375 equals, that's a 5x increase of my toilets per person. I'm guilty. And the next time we move, we're going to reduce our footprint. I swear, I promise, my head's going to feel so much better when I have a smaller house. Beautifully designed small house, because I'm also very, I'm a sensitive, deep person who needs to be around beautiful design. Thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you to Mike Carano, our producer, editor extraordinaire. If you have suggestions for me, shoot me a note. paulollinger@gmail.com. Go to my website, paulollinger.com/events to see where I'll be performing comedy soon, hopefully near you. You can also buy my record album. Well, it's not on vinyl or wax. It's a digital recording of some shows, some jokes I told in New York City, West Side Comedy Club. It's called Alive on the Upper West Side. And you can find it on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find digital audio content. If you like what we're doing here, please rate us, subscribe, write a nice review of the show. I hope you're having a great day. Go out there and do something nice for somebody else. Bye-bye.